whether we're having conversations with couples about how to have a better connection, or whether we're talking to Te Tiriti on a national scale, I think it's often boils down to a lot of the same stuff. Like, ultimately, your emotions are actually like determining how you're approaching this or what's getting in the way here.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora, welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. As some of you will have seen on the socials, it's been a big couple of weeks for me. I finished up working with one church. I was ordained in the Anglican church, beginning a full-time role with the other church that I've been doing a few hours for this year. Thank you so much for all your support and your well wishes over the last couple of weeks. I intend to take the heart of this podcast and the questions I've been asking here into my work in the church, to keep trying to find better ways to be in the world. So I'd love you to continue on this journey with me into next year and beyond. With starting a new role full-time, and with the busyness that comes with Christmas in the Anglican church, I'm going to make this episode my last one for the year, just to give myself space to grow into the role without feeling overwhelmed. But don't forget, there are over 100 episodes of the podcast, so there's plenty to listen to over the summer until I kick things off again sometime in February. If you're finding these episodes useful, please share them with family and friends. My marketing budget is a total of $0, so you are the best way for people to find out about this podcast, and I really appreciate when you share it. To today's episode, Dallas Harema is a social worker, counsellor, coach, husband, father, and so much more. My observation, having known Dallas for a while now, is that he has a really good grasp on what it means to love people well in a way that gets around the clutter to make real connections. We talk about how being Māori influences the way he sees relationships. We talk about breaking down barriers for men to be vulnerable, for couples to connect better. We talk about the current political climate around Te Tiriti or Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, and his work in Waitangi education and cultural advisement. And we talk about the need for us all to get better acquainted with our emotions. This is episode 104 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Dallas Harema. Dallas Harema, it's a privilege to be having a kōrero with you today in your whare.
My whare.
Kia ora, welcome to the podcast.
Kia ora.
Not everyone's going to know who you are, so
no
here koe. Who are you? Where are you from?
No here ahau. Tuatahi, me mihi ka tika ki te atua, ki tō tātou papa I te rangi. Ko wai ahau, he uri tēnei no ngā puhi nui tonu. Ko Ngāti Kaharau, Ngāti Hauki o Manaia o Oku Hapu, ko Harema Reihana te whāmere, o te ingoa whāmere. Aha koa e tipu ake au ki te taha toku māma I Murihiku, I Waihōpai, no Kotarani me Airihi me Ingarangi ia, ko Dallas Neihana te wapaunamu Harema toku ingoa. So, just a little brief introduction about me. I have Māori whakapapa on my father's side, which is all the way up in the Hokianga, up in Northland. Beautiful place in our beautiful nation. So he grew up there, but my mum is not but. However, my mum is my Scottish, Irish, English, Welsh, Celtic side, essentially, and she hails from the metropolis of Invercargill. So we actually grew up in Invercargill, my immediate whānau. But that has a much larger story around a lot of Māori, especially who in the 70s and 80s were kind of getting out of Northland and into work. But yeah, that's a much larger story. But yeah, now my wife and I, Lucy, and our 3 tamariki live in Christchurch, New Zealand. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. That's me.
I love when this is an aside that I hadn't actually planned.
Oh yeah.
But I love when Māori introduce themselves.
Oh yeah.
The first thing out of your mouth isn't, oh well, I'm this is what I do.
Oh, no.
It's about, or this is where I come from, and these are the people I'm connected to, and
Yeah.
these are the places I'm connected to.
Yeah.
And I think it's just such a beautiful thing. I mean, we're going to be talking about connections and relationships
Yes.
and things today, but that just struck me as you were talking, that's one reason I love when I'm engaging with Māori culture,
Yeah.
is the relational dynamic about it.
Yeah.
Have you always been immersed in te ao Māori? Or
Yeah, I mean, not. I wouldn't say immersed, but I mean, firstly, growing up in Invercargill was a trip.
Yeah.
Of all places. Although growing up, our father was very involved in kapahaka. Like he was the leader for a lot of kapahaka groups in Southland. And there were actually, like I kind of joke that there, people often ask me, so are there actually Māori in Southland? And there actually are. As I said earlier, there's a lot of Ngāpuhi down there and Māori from other iwi. But yeah, so Dad was a kapahaka tutor and he spoke te reo. He didn't speak it as much as what he arguably could have, and I probably have questions as to why that I'll never know the answers to. So yeah, we were often on marae or going to like manu kōrero competitions and going to kapahaka competitions, and so I was familiar with te ao Māori in a Māori way of being, and so it was my normal, It probably wasn't until I hit that, those years where you start asking other questions that I went, oh, it's actually different.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Than the majority of people in Invercargill. Yeah, and then, as you kind of forming your identity in your teen years and, young adult years, you start asking other questions around connection and how much you want to identify with those parts of all of who you are. So, that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
You have quite a diverse set of education.
Yeah.
You've been around, which, I mean, it resembles my own journey in some ways. I've bounced from music to sport to theology to,
yes,
all over the place. But like when I looked you up online to see, let's get a bit of background. I know Dallas, but I don't know.
But do I?
Yeah. What don't I know?
Does he even know who he is?
So anyway, I looked you up.
Yeah.
And you've studied a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the journey, between those things, and how that's kind of led you to what it is that you do
now
for your mahi today?
Yeah. I have always loved learning. Actually, I've always been a learner ever since a young age. Even when I was like a little hoha, rangatahi at high school, kind of playing up and, not always following the rules and stuff. I was always keen to understand and to know more and to dive deep into things. And that has definitely followed me into my adult years. And so, I'm always kind of considering like courses and, what I can kind of dive into, what books I can dive into, podcasts or actual papers or courses. Always been a keen learner and quite keen to learn from a diverse range of things. Yeah. But although they've had like a theme within them, absolutely, which you've probably picked up on. I've done the whole tertiary qualification thing, got a couple of letters at the end of my name, but I think more than that, because of that learning disposition, I've always been able to learn from life. Life lessons and things that have occurred throughout my life or even my family's lives or other people's lives that I've gone, I wonder what we could learn here. I think it's just more so of a learning mindset that I like to have, and probably just an underlying thinking or belief that I actually don't know everything. So there's always more. Yeah. There's always more to know. Yeah.
Is it high in your strengths finder?
Yes, learner.
Yeah,
it is actually. I have learner and input. So
learner's my number one.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So love. So learner and input together are definitely they kind of enhance one another for sure. So I've got archives of all sorts of resources and
Yeah.
books and all sorts of things that I could easily pull on if someone asked me a question. Be like, hey, I've got something stored away for that.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. You talk about a theme that connects all of the different study, and
Yeah.
that you've done, like, was it psychology?
Yeah.
And social work.
Yeah.
And counselling.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
Very people connected.
Yeah.
Very people centric.
Yeah.
What is it about working with people that, obviously, that gives you life somehow? What
Yeah.
is it about working with people that brings you alive?
Oh, yeah, that's it. It's such a big question, that one. Yeah, I actually, like, I would say that I'm a heart-based person, like, I definitely believe in the mind, of course, and developing the mind and developing your thinking and your concepts and your theories and models and all of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think I allow my heart to lead me. And so what brings me alive is seeing other people's hearts come alive, like other people owning, claiming, embodying, walking into like who they're actually designed to be, and all of its beauty and fullness, but like warts and all. I'm not kind of selling this kind of perfect version of ourselves, but a more wholehearted version of ourselves. And so I really enjoy not just seeing people, enhance who they actually are in terms of their strengths and their talents and their giftings, but actually also being able to walk through places with people through pain or trauma or the more deeper, kind of more hurtful things that we all experience, and seeing them come out the other side of that with some scars, of course, but with a sense of kind of wholeness within it, or integration within it, or transformation out of it. So that really drives me, actually. And so I do enjoy people, but I'd have to say to that, though, that only people who want to be walked with. I'm not super keen on walking with people that aren't keen to be walked with, because actually not everyone is actually ready for that, But I learnt that probably over the course of many years of kind of hitting my head against the wall going, things could be so much better for you. But actually some people don't actually want that because they're not ready, or for whatever reason. So sometimes you just got to like wipe the dust off your feet and move on to the next town, Yeah.
So what does that look like for you in terms of the actual work that you do? Like you're quite diverse in all the things that you're doing. What are sort of some of the ways that you get to do that journeying with people?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the concrete stuff. So I do. You mentioned strength, so I do that through like Strengths Finder coaching. I'm also an Enneagram coach, which I've just been certified in a month ago, and I do a lot of like supervision as well with people from various fields, like in the kind of in the helping profession, so whether it be youth working or youth pastoring or church leaders even, but also lawyers as well. I've just started kind of doing supervision, cultural supervision stuff with lawyers, especially in the family court, which is just something that I've just started doing in the last 6 months or so. And also my wife and I are really passionate actually about healthy relationships and healthy marriages, and not just for the marriage relationship. Like, we know that if people are investing time and energy into how to strengthen or deepen their connection with each other, then that's going to have it can have, it doesn't always end up this way, but it can have an impact on children. So therefore it just kind of ripples out for us, really. If we're investing in people's relationships, we're also investing in children and wider communities, even if we never meet them. Actually, we know that that's what we're doing. So my wife has a real passion for kind of children's well-being and children's health and education. And then also co-facilitating, co-leading groups with men, just men, which is definitely a personal passion of mine. Just kind of seeing a lot of the men who are kind of facing a whole lot of heartache and pain and battles and struggles, and not necessarily having places to be able to kind of talk that stuff through or work it through in community. So I'm really passionate about that. But again, I'd say undergirding all of that is just wanting to create spaces and conversations and relationships where we can be real and raw and honest and transparent. That's probably what underpins a lot of it, because I think that we, for lots of reasons, don't necessarily do that with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. There aren't a lot of spaces for guys to do that.
No, there's not. No.
In a culture that is about being tough.
Yeah.
And holding it together.
Yeah.
And showing you're a man.
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. How do you get through to allow men to be vulnerable?
Yeah, firstly, it's a tough gig. It is a tough gig, and I don't think that I'd say we, because I think women can be this way too, but in the spaces with men, I'm not sure if men really realise what it is that they are allowing to influence the way that they are in the world, or how they're showing up in relationships, whether it be with other men or whether it be with their wives, children, or whatever, that they're not necessarily awake to the factors that are actually shaping them, and also determining the health of the health of connection and the health of relationships that they have with other people. And so it can be a tough gig, and a lot of it is, I think, about creating spaces that are psychologically safe. I have a bit of a bugbear with the current term around creating safe spaces, but maybe we won't go there. I think they can be code for other things that actually, that particular term can sometimes be code for creating a space that is just so safe that I'm not being challenged or being changed. And actually, I think if sometimes we actually need to create some spaces that are a bit risky and uncomfortable, and maybe do actually invite a bit of challenge, which will kind of push us a little bit out of our comfort zone. But anyway, it can be quite hard for me. I guess
almost creating spaces that are safe to be risky.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Safe to be risky, but I think there's a real balance between you creating a space in a relationship, in a conversation, in a language that says you're safe here. You're invited to be your wholehearted self, good, bad, and ugly, and it's totally okay to kind of take some walls down. But that can take some time.
Do you think we get confused between safe and comfortable?
Yeah, I think we do.
And that we say, oh, we're creating a safe space, and we mean we're creating a comfortable space where you don't feel any discomfort.
That's right. That's right. But actually, if we remain in our comfort zone, not much change or shift can actually happen.
Yeah.
In fact, I almost have a picture of like people who are just totally in their comfort zones in the same room, but actually in isolation, because they're not actually allowing other people to come into their world and then maybe ask them some questions or challenge some things that might actually be holding them in this like bound, essentially. Yeah.
So you mentioned about things that shape us, that we might not be aware of. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of who I am has shaped why I think this. I think the fact that I'm Māori and have a value for an understanding of the importance, well, not just the importance, but the value of whakapapa, and just what has actually contributed to us being who we are today. Based on what has happened, not just the people that have gone before us, but even the events that have happened before us, even before we came earthside. And how things can actually be carried through generations, whether that be through the family or even just culturally, societally as well. And so when I talk about whakapapa, I'm not just talking genealogy, I'm actually talking about the whakapapa of emotions, and the whakapapa of pain, and the whakapapa of trauma, even things that have been carried through. And so I think that a lot of people don't necessarily think a lot about how their family of origin or their childhood experiences have actually shaped and are still shaping a lot of who they are today, and how they go about the world, and how they go about relationships, and and all of that. Because actually our family of origin will forever be the most formative kind of context that we'll ever have, regardless of how old we are, you know. And so, I mean, our family of origin, our childhood experiences has actually shaped, our view of sex, of money, of conflict, of emotions, of faith, spirituality, church, religion, all of it, politics. It's actually shaped so much. And so unless we really think about and revisit how those parts of us have been shaped and actually start to question, actually, that was then, is that still the truth now? Should I be reconsidering this narrative? Yeah. So I don't know if people really kind of think about, well, in my experience, not a lot of people think about that. They just tend to maybe take themselves as they are today and not really think, actually, there's been a whole lot that's gone before this that's actually shaped who I am today. So
that reminds me of a whole lot of the work that Matt Brown's doing with men.
Yeah.
And he's been on the podcast as well talking about that and the idea that actually we can change our narrative.
Yeah.
But we've got to be awake to what the narrative actually is.
Yeah. Which can be, I appreciate, can be very sobering and like a smack in the face and can kind of trigger all sorts of shame within us or guilt or pain. And so I have compassion for why it's hard.
Yeah. For
sure. But I also probably more so come with the other side of it, which is actually unless you face that, unless you kind of unearth that, unless you allow yourself to kind of revisit that stuff, it's probably always going to have an influence over you, and maybe it's not that good. Yeah.
What sort of changes in people have you seen as you've walked with them around that particular idea of looking back?
Yeah, man, I in our work with, like, in the men's groups or even in the relationship stuff we do, or even in the one-on-one stuff I do, inviting people to consider how their family of origin, childhood experiences, whakapapa is still shaping them today. Well, actually, let me think of a current example. With a particular husband and wife that we are walking alongside at the moment, they've got a few things going on for them, but there's a real dynamic between them where he's a bit of a persecutor and she's a bit of a victim. And actually inviting the husband in particular, who, because he's leans towards being a bit of a persecutor and therefore can kind of come with quite controlling ways, and like kind of a lot of overpowering of his wife. Part of that narrative has been learnt from how his father was with his mother and the fact that he witnessed that. And so inviting him to consider how the things he's witnessed as a child growing up in his household from his father and how his father treated his mother has been a really massive journey for him and really hard for him. Yeah. And parts of him hasn't wanted to do it, denies it. There's been a part of him that has had to move through, if I acknowledge what my dad did or said that wasn't good, I feel like I'm dishonouring him and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So there's just so many reasons why people don't want to go there. But as he's been able to move through that, he has been able to see, wow, my whakapapa, my childhood experiences are still playing out today, even though my father's no longer on this earth, but he still lives in my bones.
Yeah.
And so in that tussle and that wrestle and that challenge, he's slowly finding a sense of who he is now and who he wants to be today. But man, it's taken some time, Yeah. And it will be a forever journey potentially. He's in his late 40s, so if it's something that's been around for that long, it could take a while to walk out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know from my own experience of I had a trauma as a kid,
right,
that none of us really thought about as a trauma because that wasn't a thing back in the 80s.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I got diagnosed with anxiety and depression. But some of the things that were big triggers for that directly go back to that incident.
Yeah.
And the desire to be in control because, I realised in my mid-30s that I believed when I wasn't in control, bad things could happen. So I needed to be in control to stop those bad things.
Totally.
And, that's nearly 10 years ago now, that I became aware of that.
Yeah.
And with medication and
Yeah.
therapy and
Yeah.
stuff, it's a lot better.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm still like struggling in family, like my family dynamic.
Sure.
With my kids. You can't control your kids all the time.
No.
You know? Your kids are honestly, it's like the biggest button presses in the world.
Yes, massively so. They're like the last frontier of like formation.
So I thought I had this all worked out, and now I've had
kids.
Yep. But yeah, so journeying with them and realizing that this is not something I want to pass on, but going, okay, I've got to keep working at the way that I respond and react when I lose control in a situation. When they're acting in a way that is something that I'm not happy with.
Yeah.
But that I actually can't control.
Yeah.
How do I deal with that? And it does. It goes back to childhood. It goes back to genetics. It goes. It goes back to even the way I saw my mother not cope when she had undiagnosed stuff. And I'm sure she won't. I've interviewed her on the podcast, and she's talked about it.
There you go.
So it's okay to talk about. But it's this constant journey. And I like hearing what you're saying is, this might be the rest of your life journey.
Potentially, yeah.
But it starts with becoming aware of it.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're not aware of it, it's not even a journey. It's just an existence, eh?
Yeah.
And so you get in alongside them and help them kind of journey into that?
Yeah. And probably our main entry point is inviting people into their hearts, essentially, inviting people into their inner worlds, inviting them into their emotions. Because, man, we are absolute ninjas at coming up with ways to squash down, avoid, neglect, minimize our emotions. And the idea that we tend to believe that we're just thinking heads that can just rationalize and logicalize, that's not a word, but I made it up, our way through life is just an absolute lie, actually, because we are way more influenced and motivated by how we feel.
Yeah.
But because we don't give it the airtime, then, we just can be really unaware of how our emotions are actually playing out in our parenting, in our marriages, at work, church, wherever.
Do you... I don't know what your mix is with the people you work with of Christians and not Christians, but do you see that worse with people that have grown up in the church? Because I feel like a lot of us that grew up in the church got taught to not to trust our emotions.
Totally.
And so we feel like it's a godly thing not to listen to our emotions.
100%.
How do you battle that?
I talk a lot about, some people will be familiar with this term and some people won't, so maybe we won't dive too deeply into it, but I talk a lot about the false self. And essentially the false self, I'm hesitating to kind of summarize it because I don't want to fine tune it down to something simple because it's not simple, but essentially your false self is something that you've constructed to protect you from essentially being too vulnerable or for further pain. It's a self-protection measure. It's very self-referential, as in it's got you at the centre of your world and you on the pedestal of your life. And I think it also self-promotes as well, this idea of the false self. And so I see a lot that, and I think this is across the board, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not. I think people all have to struggle with this idea that they are trying to project this false self out to the world. But I would say that when it comes to Christians or people in church, there's also a religious false self as well, which I think makes it even more slippery and more harder to be able to identify and then also actually see what's true and what's real. And the religious false self, I think, kind of manifests in lots of ways. I think it manifests in a lot of Christianese and a lot of quote unquote good Christian behavior and doing all the quote unquote right things and saying all the quote unquote right things. And a lot of that can sometimes be just a massive facade for what's actually going on for somebody. And so if you're investing a whole lot of energy and a lot of your focus and attention is going into trying to uphold this religious false self, then my question is God really able to get to who you really are and what's really going on in your world? And I would say no. Actually, he's not, because he's actually wanting you to kind of fess up to that stuff yourself, you know? And so, yeah, when it comes to emotions, I think within the church we have just forgotten that Jesus had emotions and he expressed those, as did a lot of the other people in the Bible. And actually, so because he's our example of what it means to be fully human, we're also able to do that too. Now, yes, we don't let them over control us or over dictate exactly how we're going to go about life or be the be the absolute truth, but that's not our problem. Our problem is that we don't acknowledge them at all often, and yet they are totally playing out in many ways and coming out in all sorts of passive aggressiveness, sarcasm, bitterness, resentment, avoidance of other people because we actually don't really like them, but we have to uphold this image that we do, and it's terrible. Yeah. So I think it is worse in the church, actually. It can be. Yeah.
With your work that you do with couples, we've talked about that part of, what forms us as being a big part of that dynamic.
Yeah.
Are there any kind of major common things that you come across that get in the way of good relationships?
Oh, yeah, man.
What are some of the most common ones?
Oh, most common, just rattling them off.
Yeah.
The biggie, shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. And the thing with shame is that, Brené Brown, I love what she does so much good work around shame. We don't want to acknowledge that we've got it, but the reality is that we all have it, but we just don't want to talk about it. And we tend to kind of think about shame and go, unless I'm just in this absolute state of downtroddenness and, really down on myself, then I probably don't experience shame. But actually there's varying degrees of shame. And so essentially at its core, shame is I'm not enough.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
It's like an identity issue. There's something wrong with my core being. I think that's what shame does. And so in the couples work we do, we kind of see that outworking in many ways, husbands or wives kind of shutting down because essentially they're not able to be the husband or the wife that they thought they wanted to be, or that their partner is wanting them to be, which also might be a little bit unrealistic. I mean, there's something to be said for unrealistic expectations from partners towards each other. But so, I think shame can manifest itself in many ways in couples and cause them to shut down from each other and shut off from connection and shut off from vulnerability. Again, out of a sense of self-protection, you've hurt me in some way. So what do we do? Which is quite normal, actually. I probably should also say that it's actually a very normal human response to protect ourselves. There's nothing that's not all bad. It's not all wrong. But when it continues to be our default response, especially in intimate relationships based on shame or pain, then that is a problem, because actually you're shutting yourself off from connection and intimacy, which is what we've been designed for.
Yeah.
So shame, pain, and all the classics. I say classics. I think, and actually a lack of skills comes into this too, or a lack of parenting. Again, I think this is where family of origin stuff plays out. Actually, I don't know how to work through this conflict with you because I have never been given an example or a language. Yeah. So I actually need to be kind of reparented and taught, how do I have a conversation that is honest and transparent yet respectful? And how do I actually resolve conflict in a way that's good for me and you? I just don't know how to do that. Yeah. So for me, that's a lack of language and skills and exposure to helpful tools. But the more emotional based ones is, as I say, shame and pain, resentment, I think apathy too, which is born out of a tiredness of this has just been going on for so long and I'm over it. So I'm actually just kind of half dead to this thing. And so unforgiveness can be a biggie, of course. Pride is a massive thingy. Lack of humility can be a thing, because what we want to do if we're having conflictual relationships with anyone, husbands and wives, or just anyone, even the people at work or at church, is we kind of, we can get a little bit self-righteous sometimes, and think that they're all in the wrong. And actually they might be, you know what I mean? But actually we also then sometimes fail to go, oh, but in my heart of hearts, I've probably done similar things too.
Yeah.
So maybe I could be a bit humble and a bit gracious towards this person. But I think at its core, if we are constantly trying to protect the vulnerability of our own humanity and hearts, and so there's so much that we get drawn into, that means we cover over that, which breaks connection from people. So, yeah.
Basically what I heard in all of that was relationships are really complex.
They are. They are. And our hearts are complex.
And I mean, all of the things you talk about don't sit in isolation from each other either.
No,
so they're all wrapped up in each other, and
yeah,
you know, you're feeling shame, so you don't communicate properly, and then
yeah,
there's people assuming what the other person's thinking, and
yeah,
then that triggers something from their childhood. That
yeah,
man, it's
it is layered and complex, and I can appreciate. You know, I'm always really aware that being who I am is just in my bones, but so it comes out of me naturally. But I have to really walk this fine line of like, not everyone understands it or gets it, you know. So I've got to sometimes like calm the farm and not be so intense, you know.
Yeah.
Not be like, not everything's that deep, but it's just naturally. It's what brings me life, actually, in my kind of place in the world. So, yeah, but I think that once you start getting it and doing the work, because it does take a bit of effort and work, just the fruit of that is so much better for people. Yeah. I'd also say, like, if we actually are designed to be people who love others well, then we need to consider what are the things that are getting in the way from us not being able to love others well. Anyone. Yeah.
Which means doing a lot of work on ourselves.
It needs to involve that.
Yeah.
And you can't just like spiritual bypass it and give it all over to God. Like, actually, I think sometimes God's saying, oh, I actually want you to do something with this too. I'll help you.
Yeah.
And I'll be with you in it. But I actually need you to kind of like get in touch with some of your reality as well and bring that to me.
It's kind of like that, God, can you help my neighbour who's feeling really hungry? Please provide her some food.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And not taking his...
Yeah. In the meantime, you're having like a whole sub to yourself.
Yeah. That sometimes we are the answer to our prayer.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I think more often than not, to be honest. You know, that's a lot of my ethos around prayer is that prayer is about shaping us as much as anything. And so, yeah, getting in and doing that work on ourselves as part of the answer to our own prayers, I think, is really important.
At least a partnership, hey?
Yeah, totally.
At least co-labouring with,
one of the areas that we haven't talked really about is you do some work with organisations around cultural contexts and, and the treaty and things like that. Tell us about that sort of work.
Ooh, did you hear that big breath? It's layered with potential landmines, a lot of sensitivities, arguably oversensitivities, a lot of defences from people, a lot of like fear actually as well. I mean, again, here's me, heart person, emotion person. I'm going to go there first. So it's challenging work, but I see it as being absolutely necessary for our nation actually. And again, coming back to my own heart, I always hold my own tamariki, my own children at the centre. I try to think about how am I contributing to their future and what I'm doing, and so by me doing that work, I'm contributing to their future and who they are and all of their beauty and whakapapa. They're not just Māori. But they are what motivates me to have these hard conversations and be in those tough places and be sometimes that lone voice that's kind of pushing against the tide. So in more concrete terms, going in and having conversations either with individuals or groups of people or management teams or whatever around how do they kind of understand Te Tiriti, the history of our nation, just a really brief history. I'm definitely not a historian, no way am I a historian. Like I definitely know my lane or try to know my lane. Like if people are like, hey, come in and, give us a 3-hour lecture on the history of Aotearoa, I'm like, no, not your person.
Yeah.
but I can give you some kind of solid facts and some stories,
Yeah.
but that's kind of it, really. And actually, yeah, because I am who I am and have a sense of my lane, the slant on the conversations I'm having with people is more of a heart-based one.
Yeah.
Because I do have a solid conviction and belief that unless people's hearts are being changed and transformed, maybe not much is going to change.
Yeah. It can't all just be about head knowledge.
No, because actually,
Because all that information's out there already.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I'm like, if you want some 3-hour lesson on the history of Aotearoa, like, go get a book, get on Google, like, search something, listen to a podcast. Like, they're all out there. Do you know what I mean? But if you want to have a conversation that might actually result in some sense of transformation and change, then I can help you with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some ways, it sounds not that different from the work with couples that you're doing. Stepping
Totally.
in and asking hard questions
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
getting them to
Yeah.
explore their own fears.
Yeah.
But just doing it on a bigger scale with
Yeah.
more people over an issue that can cause some
Yeah.
real issues.
100%.
This goes back to, I guess, where we started. But one of my experiences is that this journey of learning about Te Tiriti, the Treaty of Waitangi, in Te Pākehā, and learning about our history and learning who I am as a Pākehā in the land can be a really uncomfortable journey.
Yeah. Welcome.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about with the difference between safety and comfort.
Yeah.
And that actually what I've found is it's a very rewarding and growing journey. It's stretched me considerably.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm a much better person because of it.
Yeah. Awesome.
When you're working with these groups, do you see people step into that uncomfortable space? And if so, like, what's the fruit of that you see?
I think you nailed it just then, man. Like let me kind of maybe take a little bit of a step back in that the people who don't progress or move forward or become a different person or go on and maybe have some kind of impact in their corner of the world are the ones who would rather remain in their ignorance and not necessarily know it's ignorance, but they would rather remain there because it's comfortable and it's what they know. And also the fear that they might, or the threat that they experience, that they might then have to do something or give up something or respond in a different way is just too overwhelming for some people. And even though that's not actually what's being required, it might be required of them that they make some changes and respond in a different way, but people get so overwhelmed by the threat of that they just prefer their own comfort. And so you are right, I think, in what you're saying before, and whether we're having conversations with couples about how to have a better connection or whether we're talking to Te Tiriti on a national scale, I think it's often boils down to a lot of the same stuff. Like ultimately your emotions are actually like determining how you're approaching this or what's getting in the way here. So, but the people who are willing to not be the knower of all in the room and not be the expert and not have to be the most competent one and not have to have the loudest voice or win the debate and are willing to be uncomfortable, they're the ones that actually really engage with it from all of who they are, like on a heart level. And again, like I think you said, they're the ones who experience the most growth and maturity, but it's because they've been okay to go, you know what, this is so uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it, And from a Māori perspective, that's why, even though I joke and I said welcome, like that's what Māori are experiencing all the time. Yeah. Like, I know most people don't get that, but that is what they're experiencing a lot of the time because depending on where you are in the country and all of that, different demographics and different cities and different cultures and all of that kind of stuff. But if you're in a majority Pākehā culture, then a lot of Māori, whether they know it consciously or not, are having to deal with that sense of like discomfort all the time. So welcome to the discomfort, Yeah.
Yeah. I know you're not a political expert.
Oh, no.
No. But I'm going to ask you a political question anyway.
Okay.
it's been on my mind, and I've just come here from the Ahikoi, where people gathered to oppose the government's current bill, the Treaty Principles Bill, where they're looking to redefine what they call the principles of the treaty.
Yes.
I'm wondering how much of the conversation we've just had links into that of, you know, do you reckon there's like fear?
Yep.
There's that uncomfortableness sitting there for them, and they're trying to find a way to get rid of it? Is that some of what you think's going on there?
Yep, totally. And a real lack of empathy, actually. And, you know, sometimes we kind of dilute empathy into this, it's, you know, feeling other people's emotions and walking in their shoes. But actually, empathy is the absolute antidote to a lot of the pain and the shame that we experience, again, not just in relationships, but as the result of like historical, intergenerational trauma, you know, and our story. So yeah, I do think that is at work, like underlying a lot of what's going on with that particular kind of conversation at the moment.
They almost seem to be identifying those fears that particularly elderly Pākehā have.
Yeah.
And playing on that. And heightening that.
Yeah.
And then trying to go, but we are the ones who can get rid of that for you.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Which just, to me, seems so counterproductive.
Yeah.
Because all it's doing is creating more division and more hurt and not allowing people to be released from that fear because it doesn't need to be there. But going, no, it does need to be there, and so we'll do something about it. Yeah.
As opposed to like, I think that's a really great way to look at it, I think. Andy, because as opposed to looking at it and going, actually, we're campaigning on fear. We are campaigning on older narratives that actually no longer suit the Aotearoa today. It comes from a particular demographic and generation. I think you're right. Generally, I think that's generally true. But we are kind of like building it on this particular narrative that actually the current and future generation are more and more likely not to buy into.
Yeah.
You know, whether Māori or Pākehā, actually.
Yeah.
You know, based on what we see in our health system and our education system and how Te Tiriti conversations and, you know, what it means to be a good treaty partner and what it means to be a bicultural, multicultural, based on bicultural nation. You know, those conversations are becoming a bit more in the foreground, you know. Yeah. Of course, there's resistance to it. There always will be.
Yeah.
But they're becoming more and more prominent.
Yeah.
And people are responding more positively to it. But I also think at the heart of this particular conversation around the Treaty Principles Bill is what does justice actually look like for our nation? You know, what does us being a nation based on peace and harmony, which essentially what Te Tiriti was really about, how to create a nation where we can live in harmony and peace. And because it hasn't been that or hasn't been fulfilled in that particular way or has been breached in many ways that go against what its inherent kind of design was, then what does justice actually look like now? And it's great to see so many tangata tiriti, so many Pākehā people kind of get on board with that. Because it is actually going to require us all, not just Māori.
Yeah.
One of the saddest truths that I often have to contend with, that I don't always like knowing or acknowledging, but I think has some truth to it, but also needs to be challenged, is that sometimes myself as a Māori man will never be able to say or do things that Pākehā can, where other Pākehā will respond better to it.
Yeah.
Because I'll always be seen as a Māori person saying a particular thing. That's only true in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are situations that I would be able to bring up something and talk about it in a way that I don't get dismissed as a moaning Māori.
Yes, totally.
Or moaning Maori.
Yeah.
More likely.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's just reality.
Yeah.
In some spaces. So, no, I hear that.
Yeah.
What would your encouragement be for people who are considering exploring this cultural world? Those who don't know how to start or who are just a bit nervous about starting because of, you know, what if I do the wrong thing or, you know, all of that kind of stuff that stops us from starting the journey.
Yeah.
What's your encouragement for them?
Acknowledge that's how you feel, I know I'm definitely framing myself as the emotions guy here, but I just know that we undervalue and underestimate how much our feelings are actually determining our next step in any context and relationship. So just acknowledge that that's how you're feeling and be okay with it, because I do think that people often stop in a place of fear, because all that to me sounds like fear. What if I get it wrong? What if I get uncomfortable? What if I can't do this? I'm like, just kind of acknowledge that's how you're feeling and just hold it, I guess, and just keep walking and become okay with being uncomfortable, because you might just actually learn something that you didn't know before. Yeah. And I think that in our Western world, we have such a high value for knowing everything and having all the answers. So be okay with not having all the answers. You know what I mean? And actually stuffing it up. Like, you might actually stuff it up, but even then there can be a real lesson for you in that. You don't have to take offense, Like if you do stuff it up and someone tells you off or whatever, or you get it wrong, like, it's up to you still how you respond to that. Really. I mean, it won't be a great experience. I get that. I have compassion for that. But, like, maybe we need to have tougher backs and soft fronts, and just take some steps. I hear a lot of people, especially in the kind of cultural work that I do in different spaces and places and organisations and etc. There's this real fear around tokenism. Like, I don't want to be tokenistic. So people who have a desire to take some steps, but they also have this the next thing is, I don't want to be tokenistic. How do I not be tokenistic? And I personally, I don't know where this came from actually. I want to put it this way: it wasn't me. But I've heard it said before that a great definition of tokenism is when you stop taking steps. So it's not how little you know, or like how insignificant these steps that you're taking might feel or be. It's if you just stop taking them. That's a little bit tokenistic. Which if it, on the other side of that, I'm like, you don't want to be whipping people to keep, because that's not okay either. There's definitely got to be like a grace and humility in the whole conversation for sure. It's actually way too easy for us to demonize each other. Based on our differences. And actually I'd probably also say that embrace other people's differences and uniqueness, because again, you might actually learn something about yourself and also again about this nation and our history. So
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for taking time to record it all today.
Yeah, bro.
Thanks for all the work that you're doing with people to help them with their vulnerabilities, to help them. I love what you said about helping them to be the best version of themselves. Helping to be their true selves as well, and not that false self. And I think that's something that we can all go away from this and think about of, where am I putting on masks? Where am I running from some emotions and things? And so thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for the work that you do with people around that, and for the work you're doing around the cultural stuff as well, that I think is just so important in our society at the moment. Is really, really needed. And thank you for what you're doing to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
Kia ora, bro. It's nice. It was a good kōrero.
Hello, hello heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
I'm really glad I got to re-listen to that kōrero as I edited, because there's just so much depth in it and so many ideas to ponder, especially as someone who spent years running from my emotions. So thank you, Dallas, for who you are and for what you do. Here is a blessing for you. Dallas, as you continue to journey with others in their relationships, may your own relationships continue to flourish with your wife, your kids, and your wider whānau and friends. May they help ground you, nurture you, and fill you with joy, especially when the mahi gets tough. May you always remember that the work you are doing ripples out far beyond what you can see, and that the lives you are helping change now will lead to changes for generations. May you continue to create safe spaces for people to take risks, helping them embrace discomfort for the sake of their own growth in life and their relationships. May you grow in the confidence that who you are and what you bring is a gift to the world. And may you get more and more opportunities to help others gather some of the gold you've collected on your journey. Lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks to Strahan for the music and Rangi for the karakia. And that's a wrap for 2024. Feel free to get in touch if you or someone you know fits the kaupapa or heart of this podcast, helping in some way to bring a bit of heaven down to earth, and we can see about having a bit of a kōrero with you. Enjoy some of the back catalogue over the summer, and then join me again from February with more conversations with ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Until then, me inoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Homai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia, engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino